Welcome everyone to Agile Talks by Agile Gurus. I'm your host Rahul Kataria, and today we have Reha Malik and Anand Francis, our coaches, and it's going to be a Q&A session today. So all the participants will be allowed to ask questions directly to the coaches. Hey Reha.
Hello.
Hey
Hello.
Anand.
Hey, hello everybody.
How are
Good
you?
evening.
Good. All right. So I know Sandeep can't wait to ask us questions. So I'm going to unmute Sandeep. Sandeep, go ahead and ask your first question, and then I'm going to redirect to coaches.
All right, sure. So that comes directly from my experience as a Scrum Master. And I got into the situation where the management really cares about the burn down chart, how we can keep up with it. And we need to make sure we follow all the protocols and burn down chart looks good. At the same point, team gets very much pressurized that in order for them to keep the burn down chart looking good and progressing, they tend to kind of cheat on it. So when you get into the situation, I want to ask the coaches is that what would you do in the situation where you have a couple of user stories and the sprint is ending? Now you have a choice to either you can close the story and create a new one, or you can break down the story and close this story and create a second part of it. Would you rather moving the story forward and letting your burn down chart affected, or would you rather close the story and create another one, vice versa? How would you handle the situation? That way you can keep the story going and also you can keep the management happy.
Got you. Yeah, that's a great question. Reha, do you want to take that question?
Sure. I'll take a stab at it, but I do want Anand's input because he works a lot with senior leadership. My take on metrics is always that metrics are meant to track teams' maturity. For the teams, they should not be used as a tool to perform a witch hunt by the senior leadership. And I think that is one of the reasons you would want to have senior coaches, senior scrum masters in your organizations who can help with that dialogue and coach senior leadership into it. The charts, whether they be burn down, whether they be velocity, those are great charts for teams to track their progress. I would, in this situation, do two things. One is I would revisit the metrics I am reviewing with the management. I don't think burn down charts would be a good metric if it is proving to be a center of so much of debate with the management. I would instead move focus to more predictable metrics. Number of stories completed versus plan. That's a good metric, whether you're a Scrum team or a Kanban team. I would then start focusing on throughput, cycle time measures and metrics like this, which kind of tell the story, sprint over sprint or iteration over iteration to the management, yet move the focus away from that stress of the team. Because burn down is great for the team to track how they are doing against their backlog, right? The second piece of the question, Sandeep, was around what would you do in a situation where you're close to the end of the sprint and you have two stories remaining? Would I split it or would I just carry them story forward? It's important to note that a user story, whether it's a user story, is anything which is delivering value against a requirement, like against a business functionality. It is important to note that the user story is not done until the acceptance criteria has been fulfilled, right? If your acceptance criteria has not been met, then yes, the story is going to spill over and should spill over into the next sprint. But at the same time, it is important to notate that your sizing will have to be revisited because you have accomplished a certain piece of work in the previous iteration, and now you're going to be performing work against a certain piece which is remaining over, right? So do revisit sizing, but move your story over. Don't clone it. But yes, if you can split it into a way that will give you credit for work which has been accomplished within an iteration, which has been developed and tested, and break the story apart, put that piece in this iteration and move everything else into the next iteration. Try not to make a story into development story and test story. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah. And Great point, Rhea. That you need to break up the stories, but also going back to, why do we even want to do that? Like, what's the purpose of it? And Sandeep, one thing I think I remember I was in a similar situation. So what we started doing, and this was a while ago, was we created like a small template. So with the burnout chart, we had a template which said why this happened, like why was the story not completed? Because the burnout chart does not give you the whole context behind what happened. Why was the story not done? There could be scenarios where an urgent situation showed up in the middle of the sprint, and the team had to deal with that, and the other stories got impacted or whatever else, right? So Sandeep, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
can I just add something real quick? Rahul, that was a really, really good point because, and this is something that I do myself and I always ask my other Scrum Masters and RTs to do is categorize your root causes. If 40% of your stories are being pushed out to the next sprint because of reason X, another 20% for reason Y, the sooner you start categorizing it, the easier it is to have those conversations. So like to Rahul's point, you're not just showing a wonky looking burn down, but you're showing a wonky burn down. And then you can say, these are the top 3 reasons for this sprint. Historically, these are the reasons why we miss it. So that shows a couple of things to your leadership. One is that you know what you're doing and that you're a thoughtful leader. And 2, and more importantly, it tells them where to attack, right? It gives them some sort of a target to attack.
Yeah.
yeah. I think you all brought a very good points. And what I learned from normally what happens is when I get into the situation, I make a note of that, how we got there, right? As all of you guys gave great suggestions, Reha and Rahul, and I appreciate that, and I will keep that in mind. What I also done was that I wrote down those reasons, and when we had a retrospective, right? For example, I'll just give you a real-time example that in one situation, basically what happened was we had a blocker, and the person we were trying to reach out to, he was the only one who could actually resolve the issue. I won't go into detail the issue, but it was a networking issue. And he was on vacation for next 2 weeks. And the only way what we had to do was just wait for him. What we realized was that I realized was that we don't have a backup for that particular person. So that was a kind of eye-opener for me that we are relying on one person only. If this person quits tomorrow, we don't have a backup. Yeah. So I brought up to the management's notification that we need a backup. And they also didn't know about this, that we don't have anybody who can take his task. And so that was actually a learning curve for me and for the management as well. So anytime something happens, we do learn something out of it. Yeah. And I think sometimes management understands this, but sometimes it doesn't. But that is kind of story of our life as the Scrum Master.
That's right. Yeah, thank you, Sandeep, for that question. That was a good question. I'm sure a lot of people have faced these kind of issues.
Just really quick, because I didn't want to type it because I wanted this to like resonate. So with metrics, any data points that you're looking at, metrics, I feel very, very strongly that you should keep in mind that metrics themselves are not the story, right? They don't provide the narrative. They are simply conversation starters, right? So when your burn down starts to go wonky, right, it's a conversation starter. Why? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? It's not you, and there's going to be time. You can't always have a pretty burn down. I put a thing in an article in the chat, which is really insightful, I found, about this. But anyway, just keep in mind that all data can be sliced and diced in 1,000 different ways, but it doesn't tell the story. So you can make notes about what happened, but again, it's a conversation starter. It's a conversation, like you said, with your program management to say, hey, we need a new resource that we need some backup redundancy here or whatever. It's a conversation, not a story in and of itself. So
absolutely.
Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Absolutely. Good. All right. Um, Mayank, sorry. Let's go back to Mayank. Mayank, you had a question.
Sure, thanks, Rahul. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi there. Hi. So yeah, I'm in a unique and challenging situation as an RT for about 4 or 5 teams in the release train. And now I've been through a few IT safe projects as an RTE, but this one is a non-IT one. And it's the first time I'm running a non-IT one as an RTE. And the challenge I face is the teams are considered feature teams, but because there isn't a feature being delivered, the requirements are pretty much based on the team's individual capacity and capability. So there are teams that have got they've got experts in their teams, but they're experts in their own fields. However, they're not cross-skilled, firstly, and secondly, there aren't requirements that utilize the entire team as a whole to deliver something in a particular PI, and it ends up being a 1 or a 2 man show for almost the entire PI, and the next PI then would focus on a few other people in that team. And this happens quite frequently for processes. So in my program right now, we're delivering a business process as you may call it a product from the ART. So we don't have a product or an MVP that we could take to customer, but it's a business process that the company wants to include, and they want to run it through SAFe framework to actually evolve that business process of selling. So it's a sales pipeline they're developing. So how would you suggest I should start building or coaching product owners and product managers into creating requirements that are basically dependent on processes and developing processes so that the team is a bit more cross-skilled and we can have sort of a swim lane across and teams, everybody being involved in the PI rather than it being a 1 or 2 man show?